The last thing Don Paulo DeSantis expected to find in his trunk was a witness. It was 2 a.m. in an abandoned industrial garage on the wrong side of the city. He just finished what his organization called a cleanup, the kind of work that required bleach, plastic sheeting, and a trunk that locked from the outside. His hands still smelled of gunpowder and copper. His suit jacket was folded in the passenger seat, speckled with evidence he couldn't afford to keep. He walked to the back of his black Mercedes S-Class, keys in hand, ready to dispose of the night's necessities. The trunk opened with a hydraulic hiss. And Don Paulo DeSantis, a man who'd killed 31 people without flinching, froze like he'd seen a ghost. Because there, curled up on a white pillow in his trunk, was a little girl. She wasn't supposed to be there. She wasn't part of any plan. She was maybe 5 years old, dark curly hair tied in a ponytail, wearing a pink dress that looked too clean for the filth of his world. Her small chest rose and fell with the rhythm of sleep, one tiny hand clutching the pillow like it was the only safe thing in her universe. And on that white pillow, barely visible in the dim garage light, was a small smear of blood. Not hers. Someone else's. Paulo stood paralyzed, his mind racing through scenarios. A trap, a plant, a rival family's sick game. Then the child's eyes fluttered open. Wide brown, terrified eyes that locked onto his face. For a moment, neither moved. Then she whispered 6 words that would shatter everything Paulo thought he knew about power, about loyalty, about the war he thought he was fighting. Please don't hurt me like the bad men hurt my mommy. She told me to hide and be quiet forever. Stay with me until the end, because what this mafia boss did next ignited a war that brought an entire city to its knees. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, comment where you're watching from. Now let's get started. Don Paulo DeSantis had been running the South District for 25 years. He built his empire on 3 things: calculated violence, absolute loyalty, and never leaving witnesses. His territory stretched from the industrial waterfront to the luxury high-rises downtown. And everyone knew the rules. You paid your debts, you kept your mouth shut, and you never involved children in business. That Tuesday night started like dozens before it. Paulo was finishing a cleanup, eliminating evidence from a contract that had gone sideways. A rival family's lieutenant who'd been skimming from shared operations. Quick, efficient, professional. His black Mercedes waited in the shadows of an abandoned textile factory, the kind of place where screams got swallowed by rusted machinery and broken windows. His crew had left an hour ago, disposing of the primary evidence. Paulo stayed behind to handle the weapons, the tools, the items that couldn't risk being traced. The neighborhood had learned to ignore sounds from this building. When Paulo's car was parked outside, people found somewhere else to be. Security cameras mysteriously malfunctioned, and the smart ones didn't ask questions. But this little girl didn't follow those rules. She hadn't run when the bad men came. She'd hidden exactly where her mother told her to hide, in the one place no one would think to look, the trunk of a killer's car. Paulo had seen desperate people before. Men begging for their lives. Women offering anything to save their families. Rivals who tried to bargain when they realized they'd lost. This was different. This child wasn't begging. She was explaining, like she'd rehearsed these words knowing they might be her last. Mommy said the wolf man would help me. She said the wolf doesn't hurt little girls. The wolf man. Paulo's hand moved unconsciously to his neck, where a wolf's head was tattooed at the base of his throat. His signature, known by everyone in the underworld. How did this child's mother know about him? Who was she? And why did she tell her daughter to trust the most dangerous man in the city? What's your name? Paulo asked, his voice softer than it had been in years. Brianna, she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks but her voice steady. Brianna Ellis. I'm 5 3/4. And the bad men killed my mommy because she wouldn't tell them where the phone was. Phone? What phone? The bad men, Paulo said carefully, crouching beside the trunk so their eyes were level. What did they look like? Brianna's small hand reached up, pointing at his trunk lid. In the dim light, Paolo could see what he'd missed before. Tiny scratches on the interior fabric. The child had been counting. 4 bad men, she said, her voice taking on a strange mechanical quality, like she was reciting memorized information. The first one had a scar here. She touched her left cheek, and a ring with a red stone. The second one had gold teeth and smelled like cigarettes. The third one had a tattoo of a bird on his hand. And the fourth one, she paused, her tiny body trembling. The fourth one was the one Mommy said you'd be angry about. Because he works for you. She showed me his picture. She said his name was Luca. The name hit Paolo like a bullet. Luca DeSantis. His younger brother. Paolo's blood turned to ice. This wasn't a random hit. This wasn't rival families encroaching on territory. This was betrayal. Family betrayal. And this child, this 5-year-old witness, had just told him his own brother was working with people who put children in trunks. Brianna, Paolo said, his voice deadly calm. Where did your mommy work? The little girl reached into her dress pocket with a shaking hand. She pulled out a small plastic card on a lanyard, the kind worn by people who worked in secure buildings. FBI. Special Agent Rachel Ellis. Counter-trafficking division. Paolo's world tilted on its axis. This child's mother wasn't some civilian caught in crossfire. She was federal. Deep undercover in something big enough to get her killed. And before she died, she'd hidden her daughter in the trunk of a man she knew, somehow, could be trusted to do what the FBI couldn't. Protect an innocent. Brianna, Paolo said, reaching out slowly, carefully, like approaching a wounded animal. I need you to listen to me very carefully. Did anyone see you get in this trunk? She shook her head. Mommy made me promise. She said hide when the shooting starts. Hide and don't come out until the wolf man finds me. She said you'd come back for your car. She said you always do. Rachel Ellis had been tracking him. Knew his patterns. Knew his vehicle. Knew his reputation. And in her final moments, she'd gambled her daughter's life on a killer's conscience. Paolo heard footsteps outside the garage. Multiple sets. Heavy boots on concrete. His phone buzzed. A text from his lieutenant, Carl. Boss, you need to move. Marcus Vitale's crew is asking questions about tonight's work. Says you took something that belongs to him. Marcus Vitale. One of the bad men, Brianna described. Which meant this wasn't just about Rachel Ellis being FBI. This was about something she'd found. Something Vitale wanted back badly enough to kill a federal agent and hunt her child. Paolo looked at Brianna. This tiny girl with her mother's blood on her pillow, her brave face barely holding back terror, her faith in a wolf man she'd never met. He could drive her to a hospital, drop her at a fire station, call the FBI anonymously, walk away clean. That's what the old Paolo would have calculated. Risk versus reward, exposure versus security. But this child had whispered 7 words that changed everything. She told me to hide and be quiet forever. A mother's last command. Hide forever. Be quiet forever. Disappear into a trunk and pray the wolf has mercy. Paolo DeSantis made a decision that would ignite a war, fracture his family, and force him to choose between the empire he'd built and the conscience he thought he'd killed years ago. He gently lifted Brianna out of the trunk, noticing how light she was, how she clutched his shirt with desperate fingers. He wrapped his suit jacket, the one speckled with someone else's blood, around her shoulders. Brianna, he said, his voice carrying a promise that would either save them both or destroy everything. I'm going to ask you one question, and I need you to tell me the truth. Did your mommy give you anything? A phone, a drive, anything to keep safe? The little girl nodded slowly. She reached behind her neck and unclasped a small necklace. A cheap thing with a heart pendant that looked like it came from a dollar store. Paolo's hands were steady as he took it. The pendant opened with a click. Inside, a micro SD card. Whatever was on this card got Rachel Ellis killed. Whatever was on this card made Marcus Vitale desperate enough to murder a federal agent and hunt her child through a city. And whatever was on this card was now Paolo's problem. His phone buzzed again. Carl. Boss serious. Vitali's crew at the East Dock. They're stopping all our vehicles. Looking for something. You need backup. Paolo looked at Brianna, at the trust in her terrified eyes, at the way she'd stopped shaking now that someone, anyone, was finally listening. He typed back one word. War. Then he did something that would make every criminal in the city think he'd lost his mind. He picked up the little girl, walked to the passenger side of his Mercedes, and buckled her into the seat like she belonged there. Like she was his responsibility. Like her mother's dying wish was more important than 25 years of building an empire on the principle of leaving no witnesses. Where are we going? Brianna whispered. Paolo started the engine, his jaw set, his mind already calculating what war would actually cost. Somewhere safe, he said. And then I'm going to find out exactly what your mommy discovered that was worth dying for. Because Brianna, if she trusted me with you, then I'm going to make sure the bad men learn why that was the biggest mistake they ever made. He turned the car around, away from the disposal site, away from the evidence drop, away from everything his training told him to do. And he drove toward his fortress, toward the phone calls that would shake his organization to its core, toward a declaration of war that would end with either justice or destruction. Because Don Paulo DeSantis had just become the protector of a 5-year-old FBI agent's daughter, and anyone who came for her would learn exactly why they called him the wolf. The little girl who was supposed to disappear in his trunk would instead become the reason he'd finally use all that violence for something that actually mattered. Redemption doesn't come from walking away from your sins. Sometimes it comes from turning your car around and driving straight into them. The drive to Paulo's fortress took 12 minutes. 12 minutes of Brianna sitting perfectly still in the passenger seat, clutching his blood-stained jacket, staring straight ahead like she was afraid any movement would make him change his mind. Paulo's phone exploded with calls. Carl, Marco, his accountant, his lawyer. He ignored them all except one. When Luca's name flashed on the screen, Paulo answered on speaker. Brother. Luca's voice was smooth, concerned. Heard there was trouble at the textile factory. Everything handled. Paulo watched Brianna from the corner of his eye. She'd gone rigid at the sound of Luca's voice. Depends on your definition of handled, Paulo said carefully. Vitali's asking questions. Says something went missing from his operation tonight. Something valuable. You know anything about that? Funny. Paulo's grip tightened on the steering wheel. I was about to ask you the same question. Silence. Then, what's that supposed to mean? It means I found your valuable item in my trunk, Luca. Want to explain how it got there? More silence. Paulo could hear Luca's breathing change, the slight hitch that meant his brother was calculating, adjusting his strategy. Paulo, listen to me very carefully. Whatever you found. Her name is Brianna. Paulo's voice dropped to something cold and deadly. She's 5 years old, and she watched you murder her mother. The silence stretched so long Paulo thought Luca had hung up. Then barely audible. Shit. That's all you have to say? Shit. Paulo, you don't understand. This is bigger than killing a federal agent in my territory? Than trafficking children? Than betraying your own blood? Paulo's voice rose for the first time. Brianna flinched. He forced himself calm. I want answers, Luca. Tomorrow. Noon. The warehouse. Come alone or don't come at all. Brother, please. If Vitali finds out you have her, then he'll learn what happens when you bring children into my business. Paulo ended the call. His phone buzzed immediately. The text that had started this nightmare. Check your trunk. Gift from Vitali. But now Paulo saw what he'd missed before. The message hadn't come from an unknown number. It had come from a blocked contact in his phone. Someone with access to his private line. Someone inside his organization had been watching him all night, waiting for him to discover Brianna, waiting for him to either dispose of the evidence or make the mistake of keeping her. This wasn't just Vitali framing him. This was a test, a trap, a play to either eliminate Paulo or prove he'd gone soft. Paulo pulled into the underground garage of his compound, a converted industrial building that looked abandoned from the outside, but was fortified like a bunker within. Steel doors, biometric locks, cameras on every angle. The garage door closed behind them with a hydraulic hiss. Brianna spoke for the first time since they'd left. "Is this where you live? This is where no one can hurt you." Paolo unbuckled her seatbelt gently. "But Brianna, I need you to understand something. The men who hurt your mother, they're going to come looking for you. And when they do, I need to know everything your mother told you. Everything she gave you. Can you do that?" The little girl nodded slowly. Then she pulled something else from her pocket. A small voice recorder, the kind journalists used. "Mommy said if something happened to her, I should give this to the wolf man. She said it has all the bad things on it. The things that would make you angry enough to help." Paolo took the recorder with hands that didn't shake, even though his chest felt like it was caving in. Rachel Ellis hadn't just trusted him with her daughter. She'd trusted him with evidence, with testimony, with the ammunition to bring down whatever operation had gotten her killed. She'd turned him, a killer, a criminal, a man who'd built his empire on fear, into her daughter's only hope. And now, holding that recorder, Paolo understood why. Because sometimes the only person who can fight monsters is another monster who's finally found something worth protecting. Paolo's crew assembled in the war room within minutes. Carl, Marco, Maya, and Dr. Chin. They stared at Brianna like she was a live grenade. "Boss," Carl said carefully, "what exactly are we doing here?" "Running her information." Paolo handed Maya the FBI badge. "Everything. Fast." Maya's fingers flew across 3 keyboards simultaneously. "Jesus. Special Agent Rachel Ellis. Counter-Trafficking Division. Officially listed as missing 72 hours ago." She pulled up more screens. "But look at this. There's a flag on her file. Encrypted message sent to FBI headquarters 4 hours before she disappeared." "Can you break it?" Paolo asked. Maya's reputation had been built on breaking unbreakable things. She worked in silence for 3 minutes while Brianna sat on a leather couch, drawing on paper Dr. Chin had given her. "Got it." Maya's face went pale. Message reads, "DeSantis is clean. Vitali is the target. 3 years deep. Cover compromised. Protect package at all costs." Package. Paolo looked at Brianna, who was drawing with fierce concentration. "She wasn't running from Vitali," Paolo said slowly. "She was running to me. She researched me, knew my patterns, knew I'd come back for my car. She orchestrated this." "That's insane," Marco breathed. "She gambled her kid's life on the one criminal in this city who has a rule about children." Paolo walked to Brianna, crouched beside her. "What are you drawing, Piccola?" Brianna held up the paper. Paolo's blood ran cold. "For men. Detailed faces, even from a child's hand. One with a facial scar. One with gold teeth. One with a bird tattoo. And one." "That's Luca," Carl whispered. The next drawing showed a woman on the ground, red crayon pooling around her. Above her, Brianna had drawn stick figures in a line. "Children. 12 of them." "Brianna," Paolo said gently, "where did you see these other children?" "The warehouse where Mommy worked. Pretend." She said she was pretending to be bad, so she could help them. But then the bad men found out she was pretending. Brianna's voice was mechanical, reciting facts. "They had kids in boxes. Metal boxes that got put on boats. Mommy took pictures with her secret phone. She said the pictures would save them. The SD card. The voice recorder. Rachel Ellis hadn't just documented Vitali's operation. She documented a trafficking pipeline." Dr. Chin finished examining Brianna. Physically unharmed. No signs of assault or injury beyond some bruising on her knees. Consistent with hiding in tight spaces. But psychologically, she pulled Paolo aside. "This child has been trained. Look at how she recalls information. That's not normal childhood memory." Rachel Ellis was preparing her daughter for exactly this scenario. Paolo felt sick. "You mean she knew she might die?" "I mean she knew if she did, her daughter would be the only evidence that couldn't be buried." Maya pulled up another screen. Boss, there's more. Rachel's investigation goes back 3 years. She wasn't just tracking Vitaly. She was tracking a network. Politicians, judges, shipping companies. And look at the financial transactions. Money flowing through shell corporations, ending up in... She stopped. Her face went white. What? Paolo demanded. DeSantis Holdings. Your family's legitimate businesses. Paolo, your brother has been laundering money for Vitaly for at least 2 years. You're not just dealing with trafficking. You're dealing with your own empire being used as cover. Paolo looked at Brianna's drawing again. 12 children. 12 lives Rachel Ellis had died trying to save. How many are still out there? He asked quietly. Brianna answered without looking up from her new drawing. A warehouse with shipping containers. Mommy said if nobody helped in 3 days, the boat leaves. The bad men said the kids go to people who pay lots of money. Mommy said that means they disappear forever. 3 days. Rachel died 3 days ago. The boat leaves tonight, Paolo said. Maya, pull up every shipping manifest departing the South Docks. Carl, get every man we have. Marco, call our contacts at the harbor. I want to know every container that's being loaded onto ships bound for international waters. Boss, Carl said carefully, if we raid Vitaly's operation, we're starting a war we might not win. Paolo looked at the little girl who'd been placed in his trunk, the child whose mother had bet everything on a killer's conscience. Then we'd better win, he said, because I just declared war. And anyone trafficking children in my city is about to learn exactly why they call me the wolf. The call to Luca came at 4 a.m. Paolo sat in his office, Brianna asleep on the leather couch behind him wrapped in a blanket that swallowed her tiny frame. The voice recorder played on loop. Rachel Ellis's last testimony, naming names, detailing routes, describing the scope of Vitaly's operation. You wanted answers, Paolo said when Luca answered. Come get them. Now. Luca arrived within the hour, which told Paolo everything. His brother had been awake, waiting, probably coordinating with Vitaly about how to handle the complication that wouldn't disappear. The war room felt like a tomb when they all assembled. Carl stood near the door, hand resting on his weapon. Marco flanked the opposite exit. Maya sat at her computer station, screens casting blue light across her suspicious face. Dr. Chen positioned herself near Brianna, who'd woken and resumed her compulsive drawing. The last thing Don Paolo DeSantis expected to find in his trunk was a witness. It was 2 a.m. in an abandoned industrial garage on the wrong side of the city. He just finished what his organization called a cleanup, the kind of work that required bleach, plastic sheeting, and a trunk that locked from the outside. His hands still smelled of gunpowder and copper. His suit jacket was folded in the passenger seat, speckled with evidence he couldn't afford to keep. He walked to the back of his black Mercedes S-Class, keys in hand, ready to dispose of the night's necessities. The trunk opened with a hydraulic hiss. And Don Paolo DeSantis, a man who'd killed 31 people without flinching, froze like he'd seen a ghost. Because there, curled up on a white pillow in his trunk, was a little girl. She wasn't supposed to be there. She wasn't part of any plan. She was maybe 5 years old, dark curly hair tied in a ponytail, wearing a pink dress that looked too clean for the filth of his world. Her small chest rose and fell with the rhythm of sleep, one tiny hand clutching the pillow like it was the only safe thing in her universe. And on that white pillow, barely visible in the dim garage light, was a small smear of blood. Not hers. Someone else's. Paolo stood paralyzed, his mind racing through scenarios. A trap, a plant, a rival family's sick game. Then the child's eyes fluttered open. Wide brown, terrified eyes that locked onto his face. For a moment, neither moved. Then she whispered 6 words that would shatter everything Paolo thought he knew about power, about loyalty, about the war he thought he was fighting. Please don't hurt me like the bad men hurt my mommy. She told me to hide and be quiet forever. Stay with me until the end, because what this mafia boss did next ignited a war that brought an entire city to its knees. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, comment where you're watching from. Now let's get started. Don Paulo DeSantis had been running the South District for 25 years. He built his empire on three things: calculated violence, absolute loyalty, and never leaving witnesses. His territory stretched from the industrial waterfront to the luxury high-rises downtown. And everyone knew the rules. You paid your debts, you kept your mouth shut, and you never involved children in business. That Tuesday night started like dozens before it. Paulo was finishing a cleanup, eliminating evidence from a contract that had gone sideways. A rival family's lieutenant who'd been skimming from shared operations. Quick, efficient, professional. His black Mercedes waited in the shadows of an abandoned textile factory. The kind of place where screams got swallowed by rusted machinery and broken windows. His crew had left an hour ago, disposing of the primary evidence. Paulo stayed behind to handle the weapons, the tools, the items that couldn't risk being traced. The neighborhood had learned to ignore sounds from this building. When Paulo's car was parked outside, people found somewhere else to be. Security cameras mysteriously malfunctioned. And the smart ones didn't ask questions. But this little girl didn't follow those rules. She hadn't run when the bad men came. She'd hidden exactly where her mother told her to hide. In the one place no one would think to look. The trunk of a killer's car. Paulo had seen desperate people before. Men begging for their lives. Women offering anything to save their families. Rivals who tried to bargain when they realized they'd lost. This was different. This child wasn't begging. She was explaining, like she'd rehearsed these words knowing they might be her last. Mommy said the wolf man would help me. She said the wolf doesn't hurt little girls. The wolf man. Paulo's hand moved unconsciously to his neck, where a wolf's head was tattooed at the base of his throat. His signature, known by everyone in the underworld. How did this child's mother know about him? Who was she? And why did she tell her daughter to trust the most dangerous man in the city? What's your name? Paulo asked, his voice softer than it had been in years. Brianna, she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks but her voice steady. Brianna Ellis. I'm 5 3/4. And the bad men killed my mommy because she wouldn't tell them where the phone was. Phone? What phone? The bad men, Paulo said carefully, crouching beside the trunk so their eyes were level. What did they look like? Brianna's small hand reached up, pointing at his trunk lid. In the dim light, Paulo could see what he'd missed before. Tiny scratches on the interior fabric. The child had been counting. 4 bad men, she said, her voice taking on a strange mechanical quality, like she was reciting memorized information. The first one had a scar here. She touched her left cheek. And a ring with a red stone. The second one had gold teeth and smelled like cigarettes. The third one had a tattoo of a bird on his hand. And the fourth one, she paused, her tiny body trembling. The fourth one was the one Mommy said you'd be angry about. Because he works for you. She showed me his picture. She said his name was Luca. The name hit Paulo like a bullet. Luca DeSantis. His younger brother. Paulo's blood turned to ice. This wasn't a random hit. This wasn't rival families encroaching on territory. This was betrayal. Family betrayal. And this child, this 5-year-old witness, had just told him his own brother was working with people who put children in trunks. Brianna, Paulo said, his voice deadly calm. Where did your mommy work? The little girl reached into her dress pocket with a shaking hand. She pulled out a small plastic card on a lanyard. The kind worn by people who worked in secure buildings. FBI. Special Agent Rachel Ellis. Counter-trafficking division. Paulo's world tilted on its axis. This child's mother wasn't some civilian caught in crossfire. She was federal. Deep undercover in something big enough to get her killed. And before she died, she'd hidden her daughter in the trunk of a man she knew. Somehow, could be trusted to do what the FBI couldn't. Protect an innocent. Brianna, Paulo said, reaching out slowly, carefully, like approaching a wounded animal. I need you to listen to me very carefully. Did anyone see you get in this trunk? She shook her head. Mommy made me promise. She said hide when the shooting starts. Hide and don't come out until the wolf man finds me. She said you'd come back for your car. She said you always do. Rachel Ellis had been tracking him. Knew his patterns. Knew his vehicle. Knew his reputation. And in her final moments, she'd gambled her daughter's life on a killer's conscience. Paolo heard footsteps outside the garage. Multiple sets. Heavy boots on concrete. Rules of engagement. Anyone pointing a gun at you goes down. Anyone surrendering, zip tie them. We're here for the kids, not a body count. Boss, Carl's voice was grim. These guys won't surrender. They know what they're protecting. Then they made their choice. They moved like ghosts through the fog. Paolo's team of 4. Himself, 2 soldiers named Tony and Fish, and a former Marine named Davis, approached the main entrance. The guards never saw them coming. The first guard dropped with Paolo's suppressed round through his chest. The second managed to raise his radio before Davis's knife found his throat. Then all hell broke loose. Gunfire erupted from inside the warehouse. Carl's team had been spotted. The element of surprise evaporated like the fog under searchlights that suddenly blazed to life. Go! Go! Paolo kicked open the warehouse door. The interior was chaos. Shipping containers stacked 3 high. Catwalks overhead. Vitali's men pouring from offices, weapons firing. Paolo's team spread out, using containers as cover, returning fire with controlled bursts. A bullet sparked off the container inches from Paolo's head. He spun, fired twice, dropped the shooter. Another came from his left. Tony took him down. But more were coming, drawn by the gunfire like sharks to blood. Carl, status. Paolo shouted over the radio. Pinned down at the east entrance. They've got a heavy machine gun on the radio cut to static and gunfire. Paolo made a decision. He couldn't wait for backup. The ship was leaving in 35 minutes. Davis with me. Tony, Fish, cover Carl's team. He ran deeper into the warehouse, Davis matching his pace. They found the stairway to the loading dock, burst through, and nearly died. A spray of automatic fire cut across the doorway. Davis pulled Paolo back, just as bullets chewed through the metal door frame. Grenade! Davis pulled the pin, counted 2, threw blind around the corner. The explosion was deafening. Screams followed. They charged through the smoke. 3 guards down, 2 more scrambling for weapons. Paolo shot them both before they could raise their guns. Mercy was a luxury children in containers couldn't afford. The cargo ship loomed ahead, gangway still connected to the dock. Containers being loaded by crane even now. Paolo could see the markings Maya had identified. Innocuous labels hiding human cargo. There, Davis pointed. 6 containers sat separate from the others, positioned for final loading. Each had small ventilation holes drilled in the sides, modifications that shouldn't exist on standard containers. Paolo ran, Davis covering him. They reached the first container. The door was padlocked. Paolo shot the lock off, wrenched the door open, and his heart stopped. 4 children, maybe 6 years old, maybe younger, lying on dirty mattresses, eyes glazed from sedation. Alive, but barely. The smell of fear and filth was overwhelming. Jesus Christ, Davis breathed. Get them out. Paolo moved to the second container, while Davis started carrying children to safety. Second container. 3 more kids. Third, 2. Fourth. 1 little boy who couldn't have been more than 4 years old, clutching a stuffed bear. By the time Paolo opened the 5th container, his hands were shaking with rage so pure it burned like ice in his veins. 12 children. 12 lives treated like merchandise. 12 families destroyed so monsters could make money. Gunfire still echoed from the warehouse. Carl's voice crackled. Boss, we're clear. 6 hostiles down. Lost Fish. Tony's hit but stable. Get down to the dock. Now. We have the children. Paolo pulled out his phone, dialed the number Rachel Ellis had listed in her encrypted files. FBI counter-trafficking hotline. This is an anonymous tip, he said when someone answered. South Dock, Warehouse 7. 12 trafficked children sedated in shipping containers. Vitaly operation. You have 10 minutes before my people disappear and you lose the crime scene. Move. He hung up before they could trace it. Sirens wailed in the distance. Already? The FBI had responded faster than he'd expected. Or maybe someone else had called it in. Time to go, boss. Carl appeared, blood on his vest but standing. Cops will be here in 5. The children. Already called it in, remember? They'll be safe. We need to move. Paolo looked at the 12 children being laid carefully on the dock, Davis checking their pulses, making sure they were breathing. 12 lives saved. But at what cost? Boss, Marco shouted from the warehouse. We got a problem. Paolo turned. Marco was holding a phone, one of the guard's burner cells. On the screen, a video feed of the dock, of Paolo's face, clear as day under the sodium lights. Time-stamped. Already uploading. Vitaly was streaming this, Marco said. Live feed to his buyers. Proof the merchandise was ready. Which means, everyone just saw my face. Paolo felt the walls closing in. 25 years of anonymity gone. How many viewers? Feed had 47 connections when I shut it down. Boss, your face is about to be everywhere. The sirens were getting closer. Red and blue lights reflected off the fog. Fall back, Paolo ordered. Leave everything. Take nothing. We were never here. They melted into the shadows as the first FBI vehicles screeched onto the dock. Paolo watched from the darkness as federal agents swarmed the scene, as medics rushed to the children, as someone shouted about finding 12 victims alive. His phone buzzed. Maya. Boss, it's already hitting the news. Anonymous tip saves trafficked children. But the video's leaking. Dark web forums are identifying you. Estimate 2 hours before your name goes public. 2 hours before Don Paulo DeSantis became the most famous criminal in America. 2 hours before every trafficking network in the country put a price on his head. 2 hours before protecting one little girl turned into protecting his entire organization from the consequences of doing the right thing. Paolo looked at his blood-covered hands, at Carl's wounded team, at the warehouse that would be swarming with federal agents within minutes. Get everyone home, he said quietly. Burn our phones. Destroy the vehicles. And Maya. Yeah, boss. Find out who else Vitaly was selling to. Because 12 kids rescued means 12 buyers who just lost their merchandise. And they're going to come looking for refunds. He disappeared into the fog, already calculating the cost of his declaration of war. The little girl asleep in his fortress had saved 12 children. Now he had to figure out how to save them all from what came next. Paolo had been back at his fortress for 20 minutes when the tactical vehicles surrounded his compound. Not police. Not Vitaly's men. Federal. Boss, we got FBI at every exit. Carl reported, weapon already drawn. 30 agents minimum. They're not breaching, just waiting. Paolo looked at Brianna, who'd fallen asleep on the couch after watching the news report about 12 rescued children. She didn't know yet that her mother's sacrifice had worked, that the evidence had reached the right people. Stand down, Paolo said quietly. If they wanted to breach, they'd have done it already. They want to talk. His phone rang. Unknown number. Don DeSantis? A woman's voice, professional but not cold. This is Special Agent Sarah Chun, FBI Counter-Trafficking Division. I was Rachel Ellis's partner. I'd like 5 minutes of your time. Alone. Unarmed. I'm coming to your front door. She hung up before he could respond. Paolo met her at the entrance himself, weapon holstered but visible. Sarah Chun was younger than he expected. Maybe 40, Asian American, wearing a FBI raid jacket over body armor. Her eyes were red-rimmed like she'd been crying recently. She told me about you, Sarah said without preamble. Rachel. 6 months ago, when she realized how deep this went. She said if anything happened to her, there was one criminal in this city who might actually give a damn about saving kids. You want to come in or keep talking in front of your snipers? They're not snipers. They're protection. For you. Sarah's expression was grim. The video from the dock raid has hit every dark web forum. Marcus Vitali put a $5 million bounty on your head 3 hours ago. You're the most wanted man in the criminal underworld right now. Paolo processed that. 5 million. Enough to turn even loyal soldiers. Why are you here, Agent Chin? Because Rachel died building a case that goes way beyond Vitali. And her daughter is the only witness who can bring them all down. Sarah pulled out a tablet, showed him a complex web of connections. Senator William Cross provides political protection, kills investigations. Judge Raymond Bishop seals records, dismisses cases. Detective Frank Morrison feeds intel, eliminates threats. And that's just the top tier. Rachel documented 43 people involved in this network across 3 states. Paolo's jaw tightened. You're asking me to hand over Brianna. I'm asking you to help me finish what Rachel started. Sarah's voice carried steel underneath the professionalism. 12 kids rescued tonight. But Rachel's intelligence says there are 20 more in the pipeline. Children who'll disappear if we don't move fast. Brianna witnessed the auctions. She can identify buyers Rachel photographed but couldn't name. She's the key to the entire RICO case. She's 5 years old. She's the only evidence that can't be buried. Sarah met his eyes. I'm offering you full immunity, DeSantis. Federal protection. Witness relocation if you want it. Testify against Vitali and everyone in his network. Help us bring them down, and you walk away clean. And Brianna testifies. Paolo's voice was flat. You parade a traumatized child in front of the monsters who killed her mother. I put her on a video deposition, controlled environment, therapist present. No. 20 children, DeSantis. 20 kids who are going to be sold like cattle if we don't. I said no. Paolo's voice carried enough menace that Sarah's hand moved toward her weapon. You don't ask a 5-year-old to relive her mother's murder for your case. Find another way. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then, Rachel said you'd say that. She said you had rules about kids. That's why she trusted you. She pulled out another photo. 12 children in hospital beds, sedated but alive. These 12 are safe because you broke your own rules tonight. You raided Vitali's operation. You declared war. You can't walk that back now. Paolo stared at the photo, at faces that would haunt him forever. What are you offering? Brianna testifies via sealed video deposition. She never enters a courtroom. She never sees the defendants. We control who has access. Judge, prosecution, defense counsel only. She's protected identity, relocated after trial under federal witness protection. And me. You wear a wire to Vitali's final auction. 48 hours from now. Private estate. We've been tracking it for months, but couldn't get anyone inside. Your reputation as a trafficker's enemy actually works in your favor. You show up as a buyer, nobody questions it. You get us names, faces, transactions. We take them all down in one operation. Paolo laughed bitterly. You want me to walk into a room full of child traffickers and pretend I'm one of them. I want you to finish what you started when you turned that car around. Sarah's voice softened. Rachel bet her daughter's life on your conscience. Don't make her wrong. The words hit harder than any bullet. Paolo looked back at his fortress, at the little girl sleeping inside who'd turned him from killer into protector. Brianna testifies by video only. Sealed identity. And I'm in the room when it happens. Deal. And Agent Chin? Paolo's voice dropped to something dangerous. If anything happens to her, if one of your people leaks her identity, if she gets hurt because of this testimony, I will burn the FBI to the ground. Badge or no badge. Sarah didn't cower. If anything happens to her, I'll hand you the matches. Rachel was my partner for 3 years. Her daughter is my goddaughter. We want the same thing. She extended her hand. Paolo shook it, knowing he'd just made a deal with the same government that wanted him in prison. But 20 children were still out there, and Brianna's mother had died trusting him to save them. Sometimes the right choice was also the most dangerous one. The Ashford estate sat on 12 acres of manicured grounds outside the city, the kind of property that screamed old money and untouchable privilege. Paolo arrived in a rented Bentley, wearing a $10,000 suit that made him look like every other predator attending the auction. Sarah's voice crackled in the nearly invisible earpiece. "You're live. Wires transmitting clean. 20 agents positioned around the perimeter. You see anything wrong, you say the word unacceptable, and we breach." "Copy," Paolo murmured, adjusting his cufflinks where the wire was hidden. The entrance was controlled. 2 security guards with metal detector wands. Guest list verification. Paolo's fake identity held up. Marcus Romano, private investor from Miami. The real Marcus Romano was currently zip-tied in a storage unit, courtesy of Carl's team. Inside, the estate was obscenely beautiful. Crystal chandeliers, Renaissance paintings, a string quartet playing chamber music, and 30 men in expensive suits, sipping champagne, discussing the merchandise like they were at a car auction. Paolo's stomach churned. "Welcome, Mr. Romano." A priest approached, elderly, grandfatherly, wearing full clerical vestments. "I'm Father Michael Brennan. I don't believe we've met." The priest Rachel Ellis had documented. The children's charity. That was actually a trafficking front. "First time attending," Paolo said, keeping his voice neutral. "A colleague recommended your exclusive offerings." "Ah, yes. We pride ourselves on quality and discretion." Father Brennan smiled warmly, the expression making Paolo want to put a bullet through his skull. "The viewing begins in 10 minutes. This evening we have 6 lots available, ages 4 to 9, various ethnicities. All properly documented with forged birth certificates for international travel." Paolo's jaw clenched. Sarah's voice, "Stay calm. We need him to incriminate himself. Keep him talking." "Impressive operation," Paolo managed. "How long have you been facilitating these acquisitions?" 15 years. The priest's pride was nauseating. "We started small, runaways, foster children no one would miss. But Senator Cross's political connections expanded our reach considerably. Now we source from 3 states, carefully selected from systems where paperwork disappears." "The senator is here tonight?" "Of course. He rarely misses an auction." "Ah, there he is now." Paolo turned. Senator William Cross, the man he'd seen on television giving speeches about child welfare, was examining a tablet showing photos of the merchandise. 6 lots tonight, Father Brennan continued, leading Paolo toward the auction room. "Starting bid is typically 200,000. We've had lots go as high as 800. Our buyers are quite passionate." They entered a converted ballroom. Chairs arranged theater style. A stage with a podium. And on screens behind the stage, photos of 6 terrified children. Paolo had seen violence. He'd committed violence. But this calculated evil dressed in respectability, was something worse. "Mr. DeSantis?" A voice behind him. Cold. Familiar. Paolo turned. Marcus Vitali stood there with 4 armed men, all weapons drawn. "Did you really think I wouldn't recognize you?" Vitali smiled. "Plastic surgery, new clothes. I'd know that wolf tattoo anywhere. You killed 12 of my guards. Stole my merchandise. And you thought you could walk into my auction." The room erupted. 30 buyers scrambling for exits. Father Brennan reaching for something under his vestments. Vitali's men raising weapons. Paolo didn't wait for the FBI signal. He pulled his weapon, shot Father Brennan through the center of mass before the priest could draw. The old man dropped, blood spreading across his white robes. "FBI, get down. Down now." Chaos exploded. Vitali's security opened fire. Paolo dove behind a marble column as bullets chewed through the wall behind him. Glass shattered. People screamed. Then the doors burst open. Carl, Marco, and 4 soldiers Paolo had positioned as backup, weapons blazing. "FBI, drop your weapons." Sarah's tactical team swarmed through every entrance. Flashbangs detonated. Smoke filled the ballroom. Paolo lost sight of Vitali in the chaos, but he could hear Sarah shouting orders, agents zip-tying buyers who'd tried to run. A bullet sparked off the column inches from Paolo's head. He returned fire, dropping one of Vitali's guards. Then another. Senator Cross tried to flee through a side door. 2 FBI agents tackled him to the marble floor, weapons trained on his head. Judge Raymond Bishop surrendered immediately, hands raised, already calculating his legal defense. But Vitali was gone. Breach the East Wing. Sarah commanded. Suspect is armed and mobile. Paolo ran, following the trail of shattered glass. He found Vitali in a study, trying to open a wall safe, hands shaking. "It's over," Paolo said, weapon trained. Vitali turned, wild-eyed. "You destroyed everything. 5 years building this network. 20 million in annual revenue. All because of one FBI bitch and her. Say her name." Paolo's voice was deadly quiet. "Rachel Ellis. Say her name. That's what this is about." Vitali laughed, a broken sound. She was a Fed. She was doing her job. This is business, DeSantis. Just business. She was a mother. Paolo's finger tightened on the trigger. "And you killed her in front of her daughter." "Boss." Sarah burst in, weapon drawn. "Don't. We need him alive for testimony." Paolo stood there, weapon trained on the man who'd ordered Rachel Ellis's execution, who'd trafficked dozens of children, who'd turned human lives into merchandise. The old Paolo would have fired, would have eliminated the threat, would have delivered justice the only way he knew. But Brianna was waiting at his fortress. 12 children were safe in hospitals. 20 more could be saved with Vitali's testimony. Paolo lowered his weapon. "He's yours, Agent Chun." Sarah's team swarmed Vitali, cuffing him, reading rights he didn't deserve. The ballroom was a war zone. 6 of Vitali's men dead. 3 FBI agents wounded. But 23 buyers in custody, including a senator, a judge, and a priest. And on the screens behind the stage, photos of 6 children who would never be sold. Paolo walked out into the night air, hands shaking with adrenaline, suit covered in blood that wasn't his. His phone buzzed. "Maya. Boss, it's everywhere. Video from inside the estate. Your face. Your name. CNN is running it. Mafia boss infiltrates child trafficking auction. You're a hero, and you're completely exposed." Paolo looked at the federal agents loading prisoners into vans, at Sarah coordinating with headquarters, at the media helicopters already circling overhead. His anonymity was gone. His protection was gone. But 6 more children were saved. And sometimes that was enough. Please smash the like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Drop your comments about the video. The FBI safe house was supposed to be untouchable. A nondescript brownstone in a quiet neighborhood. 3 agents on rotation, security cameras on every angle, panic room in the basement. Brianna had been there for 36 hours, preparing for her video testimony scheduled in 72 more. Paolo stayed close, sleeping in shifts with Carl and Marco. Dr. Chin checked on Brianna every few hours. The child was drawing again. Pictures of rescued children, stick figures holding hands under a smiling sun. "She's processing trauma through art," Dr. Chin explained. "It's healthy. She's starting to feel safe." That night, safety shattered. The first explosion took out the front door at 2 a.m. Paolo was awake instantly, weapon drawn, already moving toward Brianna's room. The second explosion, rear entrance. Military-grade breaching charges. Contact. Agent Williams, one of the FBI guards, opened fire from the second-floor window. His transmission cut to static and gunfire. These weren't Vitali's thugs. Paolo recognized the difference immediately. The precision, the coordination, the way they moved through smoke like ghosts. Professional contractors. 15 of them, tactical gear without insignias, suppressed weapons. "Carl, get Brianna to the panic room." Paolo fired through the doorway, dropping one contractor as he breached the stairs. "Marco, cover the..." The third explosion came from below. The basement. They'd breached the panic room's only escape route. "We're cut off." Carl appeared carrying Brianna, who was crying silently, clutching her stuffed bear. "Boss, they knew the layout. Every exit, every safe house protocol. This was inside information. Inside information. FBI safe house. Military contractors. Paolo's blood ran cold. This wasn't Vitali. This was bigger. Sewers, Paolo said. Old tunnel system under these brownstones. Kitchen floor, loose tile near the stove. Agent Williams crashed through the doorway, bleeding from his shoulder. Sir, we're overrun. Agent Martinez is down. Agent Chen called for backup, but... He stopped, looked at Brianna. Made a decision. Get the girl out. I'll hold them. Williams. Go. The agent turned back toward the stairs, emptying his magazine at shapes moving through the smoke. Paolo lifted the loose tile, revealing a rusted access hatch. Below, darkness and the smell of old sewage. He'd used these tunnels 20 years ago for smuggling. Hoped he remembered the way out. Down. Now. He pushed Brianna through first, then Dr. Chen. Carl followed. Marco fired covering rounds as contractors poured through the second floor. Paolo dropped through last, pulling the hatch shut just as bullets sparked off the kitchen floor above. He could hear Agent Williams's weapon go silent. Then a single gunshot. Execution. They ran through pitch-black tunnels. Dr. Chen's phone flashlight their only guide. Water sloshed around their ankles. Storm runoff mixed with things Paolo didn't want to identify. Brianna whimpered but didn't cry out. Behind them, the hatch opening, flashlight beams cutting through darkness, voices speaking in clipped professional tones. Keep moving, Paolo urged. His mental map of the tunnels was 20 years old, but the turn should be there. Left junction, narrower passage. The explosion came without warning. The shock wave threw Paolo forward, slamming him into Brianna and Dr. Chen. The tunnel behind them collapsed in a roar of concrete and fire. Paolo felt something hot tear through his back, shrapnel from a shaped charge they'd planted. His shoulder burned. His back felt like it was on fire. But Brianna was underneath him, and he'd taken the debris instead of her. Boss! Carl dragged him up. Blood poured down Paolo's back, soaking his shirt. Can you move? Have to. Paolo forced himself forward, scooping up Brianna with his good arm. The little girl was unconscious. Blast concussion or terror, he couldn't tell. But she was breathing. They stumbled through the tunnels for what felt like hours, but was probably 15 minutes. The contractors behind them were digging through the collapse, their voices echoing. Finally, a ladder. Rusted iron rungs leading to a street grate. Paolo's vision was graying at the edges from blood loss. Carl had to climb first, force the grate open. They emerged in an alley 3 blocks from the safe house, behind an abandoned warehouse Paolo had purchased years ago under a shell company. His hidden backup property. The place even his crew didn't know about. Get inside, Paolo managed. His legs gave out. Carl caught him before he hit the pavement. Dr. Chen worked on Paolo's kitchen table while he drifted in and out of consciousness. The shrapnel had embedded in his left shoulder blade and 3 pieces in his lower back. She extracted them without anesthesia. Couldn't risk the time it would take to sedate him properly. Paolo bit down on leather, tasting blood, feeling every cut. You need a hospital, Dr. Chen said, her hands covered in his blood. Can't. They knew about the safe house. FBI location. FBI protocols. Paolo's words slurred. Someone inside gave them everything. Boss, that's insane. The FBI. Wanted Brianna. Paolo turned his head, saw the little girl sleeping on his couch, wrapped in blankets. Still clutching her bear. Still alive. She's the witness. The evidence. Worth killing for. His vision faded. Before the darkness took him, he reached toward Brianna's sleeping form and whispered words he hadn't meant to say aloud. I won't let them take you. I promise. Not ever. Then the pain dragged him under, and Paolo DeSantis, who'd killed 31 people without flinching, dreamed of a 5-year-old girl trusting a wolf to keep his promises. Paolo woke to the smell of coffee and antiseptic. His back felt like someone had driven nails into his spine. Dr. Chen appeared above him, checking his bandages. You shouldn't be alive, she said flatly. 3 inches to the right, that shrapnel severs your spinal cord. 2 inches higher, it punctures your lung. You got lucky. Don't feel lucky. Paolo sat up despite the agony. Brianna? Kitchen table drawing. She's been asking for you. He found her exactly where Dr. Chin said, crayon in hand, creating another picture. But this one was different. Darker. What are you drawing, Piccola? Brianna looked up with those huge brown eyes. The night Mommy died. I remembered something new. Paolo's chest tightened. You don't have to. Mommy said the wolf man would protect me. Brianna's voice was steady, but tears tracked down her cheeks. She said you'd keep your promises. But she was scared of someone else. Someone she thought was her friend. Who? The eagle lady. Paolo froze. What did you say? Brianna picked up her crayon, drew a woman's face with surprising detail for a 5-year-old. Then she drew something on the woman's wrist. A bird. An eagle, wings spread. She had this tattoo right here. Mommy saw it when the lady was loading her gun. That's when Mommy knew. That's when she told me to run and hide. Paolo's blood turned to ice. He'd seen that tattoo. On Agent Sarah Chen's wrist, barely visible when she'd shaken his hand at the fortress. He'd thought nothing of it. Lots of people had tattoos. But Rachel Ellis had noticed. In her final moments, she'd realized her partner was the traitor. Brianna, Paolo said carefully, did the eagle lady say anything? Anything at all. The little girl nodded. She told Mommy, you shouldn't have looked at the auction files. You weren't supposed to know about the international buyers. Then she shot her. The room spun. Sarah Chun had been Rachel's killer. Not Vitali. Not Luca. Sarah, who'd offered immunity, who'd sent them into the auction, who'd known about the safe house location, who'd sent the contractors to eliminate Brianna. We got a problem. Just intercepted police scanner. FBI is looking for us. Claims we kidnapped a federal witness. Agent Sarah Chen is leading the manhunt. Of course she was. She needed to find Brianna before anyone learned the truth. The evidence, Paolo said suddenly. Rachel Ellis had evidence. Something Sarah couldn't find. That's why she kept Brianna alive. Leverage to find whatever Rachel hid. Brianna's hand moved to her neck, touching the cheap necklace she always wore. The heart pendant her mother had given her. Mommy said this was magic, Brianna whispered. She said it had all the secrets. She said if the bad people came, I should give it to the wolf man. Paolo's hands shook as he took the necklace. The pendant opened with a soft click. Inside, a micro USB drive. Jesus Christ, Carl breathed. She's been wearing the evidence this whole time? Paolo plugged the drive into Dr. Chen's laptop. Files loaded, videos, financial records, communications, names. Everything Rachel Ellis had compiled in 3 years of deep cover. And there, in a video file dated 2 days before her death, Rachel and Sarah Chun discussing auction buyers. Sarah's voice, clear and damning. The international network pays better than the Bureau ever could. We just need to make sure DeSantis stays ignorant. Keep him focused on Vitali. He'll never know we're using his territory for transport. She was running protection for traffickers, Dr. Chin said, her voice hollow. Using FBI resources to cover the operation. Paolo's phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered. Don DeSantis. Sarah's voice, no longer professional. Cold. Deadly. I know you found the drive. And I know you know. So let's discuss terms. Terms. You give me that drive and disappear. Take the girl. Leave the country. I don't care. But that evidence never sees daylight, or everyone you care about dies. Carl. Marco. Dr. Chun. And Brianna. Well, witnesses have such unfortunate accidents. You murdered your partner. I eliminated a threat to $1 billion operation. Sarah's voice carried no remorse. Rachel was good, I'll give her that. Took her 3 years to find the auction records. But she made one mistake. She trusted me. Now you're about to make the same one. What mistake is that? Thinking I'll let any of you live. The line went dead. 30 seconds later, the safe house's security cameras showed black SUVs pulling up outside. FBI raid jackets. Tactical gear. But Paolo recognized 2 faces from the safe house attack. contractors, not federal agents. She's here, Carl said, chambering around, with at least 20 men. Paolo looked at Brianna, at the USB drive containing evidence that could bring down an international trafficking network, at his wounded crew with limited ammunition. Sarah Chun had every advantage. Numbers, equipment, FBI authority to kill them and call it justified. But Paolo had something she didn't. He had nothing left to lose. Get Brianna to the panic room, he ordered. Dr. Chun, lock yourself in with her. Carl, Marco, we hold this position until real FBI arrives. Boss, there's 20 of them and 3 of us. Paolo checked his weapon, felt the fire in his wounded shoulder, and smiled without humor. Then we'd better make every shot count. The siege was about to begin. And this time, the wolf wasn't running. The first assault came hard and fast. Sarah's mercenaries breached simultaneously from 3 entry points: front door, back window, basement access. Paolo's safe house wasn't designed for extended siege, but it had reinforced walls and excellent sight lines. He dropped the first contractor coming through the front door with a headshot. Carl took out 2 more at the back. Marco held the basement stairs, his rifle thundering in the confined space. Ammunition check, Paolo called out. 3 magazines. Carl shouted back. 4. Marco. Paolo had 2. Against 20 attackers with unlimited ammunition and FBI authority to level the building if necessary. The odds were impossible. Then the front door exploded inward. Not breached, but blown with enough C4 to collapse the frame. Paolo dove behind an overturned table as shrapnel tore through the room. Through the smoke, a voice. Paolo, stop this. You can't win. Sarah Chun stepped through the ruined entrance, flanked by 4 contractors. She wasn't wearing FBI gear anymore. Just tactical black, a rifle in her hands, her expression colder than Paolo had ever seen. The drive, Paolo. Last chance. Come take it. Sarah raised her rifle, and a gunshot cracked from behind her. One of her contractors dropped, blood blooming from his neck. Everyone spun. Through the smoke, a figure emerged. Bleeding from his left arm, suit torn, but alive. Luca DeSantis. Paolo's brother raised his weapon, trained it on Sarah. Sorry I'm late, brother. Had to convince the real FBI that their golden agent was dirty. Luca. Paolo couldn't believe what he was seeing. Turns out getting shot and betrayed makes you reconsider your life choices. Luca fired again, dropping another contractor. Been working with internal affairs for 2 weeks. Recorded Sarah coordinating the safe house attack. Traced her offshore accounts. She's been laundering trafficking money through federal evidence vaults for 5 years. Sarah's face contorted with rage. You're both dead. All of you. She opened fire. The room exploded into chaos. Paolo and Luca dove in opposite directions, returning fire. Carl and Marco poured from their positions, creating crossfire. Sarah's contractors scattered, seeking cover, but the 3-way attack had them boxed in. Paolo fought his way toward Luca, firing over his brother's head to drop a contractor coming from his blind side. Luca returned the favor, shooting 2 more who'd flanked Paolo's position. On your 6, Luca screamed. Paolo spun, fired, watched the last contractor fall. Then it was just Sarah, backing toward the door, rifle sweeping between the brothers. You're finished, Luca said. FBI director himself is 3 minutes out with 50 agents. I called them when I saw you breach. Everything's on video. You're done. Sarah laughed, a broken sound. You think this ends with me? This network spans 14 countries. You rescued 12 kids. There are 200 more in the pipeline. You arrested 40 people. There are 2,000 more. You got nothing. Wrong. The voice was small, 5 years old, but it carried more courage than any soldier Paolo had ever seen. Please smash the like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Drop your comments about the video. Brianna Ellis stepped out from the panic room, USB drive held in her tiny hands above her head. My mommy died for this. Tears streamed down her face, but her voice never wavered. She said it has all the bad people's names. All the places where kids are hurt. Everything. You don't get to have it. You don't get to win. Sarah's weapon shifted toward Brianna. Paolo moved without thinking, diving between them just as Sarah fired. The bullet took him high in the chest, punching through his already wounded shoulder. He crashed into Brianna, shielding her with his body as he fell. But Luca fired first. Second. Third. Sarah Chun, FBI agent and trafficker, dropped like a puppet with cut strings. Then sirens, real ones. Flashlights. Federal agents pouring through every entrance. FBI Director James Morrison himself appeared, taking in the carnage, the bodies, the little girl clutching a USB drive while a Mafia boss bled out protecting her. Secure the scene. Get paramedics in here now. Paolo felt hands on him, voices shouting medical terms. But he only cared about one thing. Brianna. I'm okay. Her small hand found his. You kept your promise, Mr. Wolf. You didn't let them take me. Paolo smiled despite the pain. Despite everything. Never will, Piccola. Never will.